What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, where today we have another mock draft video. This time we're gonna do every single team their first round draft pick for mock draft Monday. So we will get right into it, no hesitation. um, Now, for the Tennessee Titans, when we look at their needs, again, you see a lot of reports about the Titans kind of choosing to go away from the route of going quarterback. Uh, I think that they will draft a top defensive player. I do think that it will be Abdul Carter. I do think that Abdul Carter is a generational talent. He's probably the most talented player in this draft. And the Titans went on record and said, they will not pass up on a generational talent. Abdul Carter is that generational talent. And up next, we have the Cleveland Browns, who also said that they weren't leaning necessarily toward going quarterback. So we find ourselves in a situation where the Browns and the Titans both choose not to go quarterback. Cam Ward probably falling past the Browns here. I do think that in this situation, the Browns they're going to go somebody like Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter stating that he will play both offense and defense. However, he is primarily listed as a corner, and I do see him taking probably a majority snaps at corner. I do think that this is a situation where the Browns choose the best player available, and he just so happens to fit a major need for them. They get Travis Hunter, which leaves the Giants in pretty much the position that they want. I think you're looking at the Giants here to draft quarterback. The Giants have been linked to a couple of veteran presences, such as Russell Wilson, and they've looked at guys like Sam Darnold. However, I do think that the Giants are ready to draft their quarterback of the future, and I do think in this situation it is the best quarterback in this class. On paper, Cam Ward. Now, Cam Ward over Shedeur Sanders, I think that Cam Ward is a more poised quarterback, and I do think he has more of the makings to be a successful NFL quarterback than Shedeur Sanders does. Sanders kind of slow. You know, didn't really see him do much of anything great other than accuracy in college. Didn't really beat any top teams. I just don't think that Sanders has the talent of a first round quarterback in comparison to Cam Ward, but this is a slower draft class. That being said, again, I do think that the Giants are going to take Cam Ward here, draft their quarterback of the future, and set Malik Nabers up with a solid quarterback after the Daniel Jones era. Patriots up next. And there are a couple of options for the Patriots. Mason Graham is a guy that I think that would fit very well into the Patriots' play style and what they try and do on defense. However, I do see pretty much everybody going with Will Campbell, tackle from LSU, considered to be the best tackle by far in the draft. The Patriots definitely need some offensive line help to protect Drake May now that Drake May is, starting to play more. And he's proven to have some talent. So get some guys up there up front that can help protect your quarterback. Maybe you have, your franchise quarterback right there for you. You want to protect him. They're going to go Will Campbell. I think that it's pretty simple. Jacksonville Jaguars up next. Could go Jahdae Barron, who has been rising up the ranks a lot lately, surprisingly. But I do think that the Jaguars in this case, they are going to look defensive interior. They had a very, very trash run defense last year. Jacksonville needs somebody right there in the middle to help stop the run. Mason Graham fits that profile perfectly. Jacksonville gets their strong defensive interior going again, and hopefully they can have a bounce back season. Up next, Raiders. Couple of different things the Raiders are going to be looking at here. Ashton Gianti is a possibility that I've seen a lot of people take. You have a couple of wide receivers here, Jahdae Barron, but I do think that this is where Shedeur Sanders is going to go. He hasn't been the most popular player as of late. I saw some reports from the Combine. A top 7 team said that he was very arrogant and a little cocky, and they didn't really care for, how he was acting at the Combine itself, which is leading teams to kind of turn away from Sanders. I've heard that this is as early as he'll go to any team. None of the other top 5 are even going to consider him, and there's not a lot of talks about teams, trading up to try and grab him. So I do think that this is a situation where the Raiders grab Shedeur Sanders, get their quarterback who they think is their quarterback of the future, and he arrives in Las Vegas. New York Jets up next. And with what the Jets need, there are a couple of different decisions to go with. I do like Jahdae Barron going to the Jets, putting him opposite to Sauce Gardner. That could be one of the scariest secondaries in the entire league. Another option, and this is an option that I'm seeing a lot more often now, it's Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren, a tough tight end at Penn State, considered to be an amazing talent. 1,200 yards, over 100 receptions last year. Incredible talent, and the Jets really do need a tight end. But I do think that this is what's difficult. I do think that it's probably one of these two choices. I do think the Jets, with them losing DJ Reed, and some other major secondary players that are skipping my mind at the moment, I do think that this is a position where the Jets need to go with a guy like Jahdae Barron, reinforce that secondary. You're about to lose a lot of guys there, so you really want to bring in some young talent to help, reinforce what you're trying to keep on that defense. Very tough defense. Had a little bit of a down year last year, but, everybody thought that if they could get their offense going, this was going to be one of the scariest teams in the league. So Jets want to try and get back to that level of defense, and Jahdae Barron will help them do so. Carolina Panthers up next. I think that if Jahdae Barron wasn't going to go to the Jets, I do think that he would go to the Panthers. The question that I have with the Panthers is, what are they trying to do on defense? What do they feel is their biggest struggle? I do think that their secondary is a little bit tougher than their defensive line. This is one of the worst rush defenses over the last couple of years. They've been atrocious. So I do think you need to reinforce that defensive line. You have a guy here like James Pierce Jr. However, I saw some reports earlier today that said that Pierce Jr. Probably has the worst character of anybody in this draft class. And it's shying teams away, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he falls toward the end of the first round because of the character concerns of James Pierce Jr. That being said, I think the Panthers are going to lean toward another questionable character in Mike Green. However, I do think that Mike Green is more likely to be successful based off of what we've seen so far from both of them. I think he is a lot easier to save than James Pierce Jr. And I do think that the Panthers go and get their guy here. Mike Green had an incredible season last year at Marshall, 17 sacks. It was absolutely insane. There were some concerns because it is a smaller school, so are they playing that level of talent? But I do think that this is a situation where the Panthers go Mike Green, get their edge rusher. So now we find ourselves with the New Orleans Saints, who are in desperate need of a couple different things. I see wide receiver need here, and I do see some guys that I think the Saints would definitely benefit from. We could target that offensive side of the ball, get Chris Olave some help, and Rashid Shaheed. McMillan's here, Burns here, Tyler Warren is here. I think that this is a situation where the Saints aren't going to pass up on the best tight end available in this class. They get a star-studded tight end. I like to call them the security blankets of an offense. If you have a good tight end, that's your security blanket. Get you those yards, get you those first downs, make those big plays. I do think that Tyler Warren could be that guy for the Saints. And I do think that the Saints have been without a top-level tight end and a very long time. Last time having Jimmy Graham, it's been a while since they've had that level of talent. They might want to get back to that. Get Derek Carr or Spencer Rattler, whoever is going to be the starting quarterback, another weapon, and a potential blocker for them. So Tyler Warren here going to the New Orleans Saints. All right, Chicago Bears here. I think that the obvious pick here for the Bears, that a lot of people think, is Ashton Gianti. They probably don't believe in DeAndre Swift very much. So there's some talks that Ashton Gianti goes to Chicago, helps improve that offense. However, I do think for the Bears, there are some other things that need to be addressed. In particular, their offensive line. They don't necessarily have the best offensive line. There's a reason why Caleb Williams was the most sacked quarterback in football last year, and the Bears need to improve their offensive line first and foremost before they even consider going after a player such as Ashton Gianti. Who that player is, I think that the Bears would benefit greatly from a player like Kelvin Banks Jr., a guy that is 6'4", 320, very good blocker, very, very good blocker. Only allowed 1 sack last year, 2 hits, and 7 hurries. He was very, very good at his position of tackle. He has the potential to be great in any offensive line position. He could probably play guard too if you really needed him to, which the Bears do look like they need a guard. I think that Kelvin Banks Jr. is a guy that Chicago would be very interested in. And I do think that this is the situation that the Bears will go with. Grabbing a tackle in the first round, 49ers on the clock, and immediately already thinking the same thing. Armand Membu is my pick for the 49ers, a guy that can play both tackle and guard, probably going to play guard while Trent Williams is still there, but will probably move over to tackle once Trent Williams is retired. Armand Membu, very versatile in the offensive line. Very, very good blocker. I think that the 49ers will love him. I've heard that he's already met with them. I would love to get Membu in the first round. Let's go ahead. Let's grab him. Cowboys on the clock next. And they look like they could really use some help on the offense. Micah Parsons could use a guy opposite him. James Pierce Jr. is there. But I do think that this is a situation where the Dallas Cowboys will address their offensive weapons. Dak Prescott coming back from injury. They have CeeDee Lamb, obviously, and not really much else. I think that the Cowboys grab a guy like Ashton Gianti to help improve their offense. They're in dire need of a running back. They're going to lose Rico Dowdle probably to the free agency. And why not bring a guy like Ashton Gianti in? You don't have anybody else to play running back right now. And what are the odds you're going to find a decent running back in free agency? You guarantee your running back of the future in this case. You get Ashton Gianti. And maybe he can be the next Zeke or better than Zeke. That's what the Dallas Cowboys are going to go ahead and do. They're going to grab Ashton Gianti here. Miami Dolphins up next with pick number 13. They do need some offensive line help, and they do need some help on the defensive interior. You could look at a guy like Walter Nolan or Josh Simmons to fill either one of those roles. However, the Dolphins are about to lose both of their top safeties in Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer, and they are going to need somebody to replace him. So Malachi Starks from Georgia fits right in for them. You lose two safeties, you grab one in the draft. Why not grab the best one in the draft? Malachi Starks from Georgia goes to the Miami Dolphins. I think that it's a perfect fit. It makes the most sense for them, especially losing both of those guys who are incredible talents. You want somebody talented in your secondary to replace them. Malachi Starks, that's your guy. All right, Colts up next, and the Colts find themselves in an interesting position. I think in most cases I've seen Tyler Warren kind of fall to the Colts, and it kind of makes for a perfect pair. Get Tyler Warren for Anthony Richardson. However, in this situation, I do think that the Colts are the most likely team to pick a guy like James Pierce Jr. There's not really anybody else necessarily to be too interested in. I've seen some cases where Will Johnson could go to the Colts and help improve that secondary, but I do think that with how impressive James Pierce Jr.'s combine was, and just how talented of a player he is, I think that the Colts are willing to take the risk on the character concern here, just as they took the risk on Anthony Richardson as a quarterback. I think that he goes with them pretty perfectly. He does help improve that defensive line. James Pierce Jr. going to the Colts. Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons now find themselves in a situation that I don't think they anticipated finding themselves in. And I think that's having to do with the receivers that are still available. I think in a lot of situations, McMillan has been taken early, and people are expecting McMillan to be taken early. However, I've seen a lot of reports that say McMillan is falling out of the top 10, and I think of all of the teams that are after the top 10, I think that the Falcons make the most sense when it comes to fit for McMillan. You have a quarterback in Michael Penix who showed some great flashes last year and showed that he can be successful with his receivers. Drake London was a perfect example of that. Popped off in one of the games like right at the end of the year. Um, and obviously Darnell Mooney is an incredible talent, but you put a receiver like McMillan opposite of Drake London, and I think that the Falcons could have something special here. You get a top receiver for your basically rookie quarterback, and you get him all the help that you can find for him. I think McMillan will be a great help to him, and I think he is going to be the choice of the Atlanta Falcons. All right, Cardinals up next, and I think that the Cardinals are in desperate need once again to protect Kyler Murray, who has been dealing with injuries throughout his entire career. Came back. We saw that he can be good if he is protected, but the Cardinals are going to need somebody to help block their playmakers. James Conner constantly getting hurt. Kyler Murray constantly getting hurt. I think that Josh Simmons here, tackle from Ohio State, you put him in to block Kyler Murray. Give him a big body in front of him. You see 6'5", 310. I think it's a match made in heaven. Kyler Murray really, really does need that protection. He makes too many dangerous plays. So you really want to help him feel comfortable in the pocket where he doesn't feel like he has to step out and put himself at risk. And I think Josh Simmons does a pretty phenomenal job would do a pretty phenomenal job of blocking for Kyler Murray. So I think that is the route that the Cardinals are going to go, especially based off of what I see left here. Bengals up next, and this is where I think Luther Burden comes into play. Burden, obviously, rising up the ranks. People are kind of looking at him to maybe be a little bit better than McMillan. I've seen as of the second, probably half of the pages that I saw had McMillan as 2 and Burden is 1, so there is a little bit of a rivalry there. I saw today that the Bengals did franchise tag T. Higgins, so that means that they are guaranteed to have both Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I think that they could get another receiver. I think that they would benefit here from another receiver. I don't really think they could. I'm sure they could use a guy like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant. However, I do think that they're pretty good on their defensive interior. They're more likely to lose like Sam Hubbard on the outside in this offseason. Thinking Sam Hubbard, right? But they're more maybe it's Trey Hendrickson. They're gonna lose one of their guys probably in the offseason. I do think that the Bengals probably, let's just be honest, they're the team that's most likely to do this. We know that Joe Burrow needs protection. We know that the defensive line needs help. But the Bengals are just the most likely team to make a decision like this, and they're probably going to go Luther Burden to get Joe Burrow even more help and more threats. Seattle Seahawks. I've seen Jahad Campbell rising up the ranks as of late. He was projected originally as like a second-round pick. But from the looks of it, he tested pretty well. So I do think that the Seahawks, who are in dire need of a linebacker and find themselves in a position where they may not want to reach on a Michael Williams or a Shamar Stewart, frankly, I think that this is. I think that the Seahawks are the most likely team to go ahead and choose uh, a guy like Jihad Campbell, which, I mean, in this situation, they are because they are in dire need. And I think that they're willing to take that risk on a high ceiling level player in Jihad Campbell. So I think that the Seahawks go the linebacker route, although I don't know if that's necessarily the best decision for them. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now is when we start talking about Will Johnson. Okay. Um, there are some injuries that are a major concern and have been a concern leading into this offseason. Is he going to test well? Is he going to be able to keep up? Um, you know, I think he's a talented level player. He definitely deserves to be drafted in the first round. He definitely, I feel like if he was healthy, he would be a top 5 pick, undoubtedly. And the injuries are just, piling up and piling up, and it's becoming a concern for a lot of teams. But I do think that the Buccaneers are most likely to take that risk here with Will Johnson. Their secondary wasn't the best last year. Frankly, they were pretty poor. So they are willing to take a risk and grab Will Johnson here. Help improve their secondary, grab who could questionably be the best corner in the draft. For some people, the Buccaneers are going to go ahead and take him here at pick number 19. Denver Broncos up next. Another team that could use a linebacker. A team that could really use a receiver, really use a tight end, a safety. I've seen a couple of different ways that this has gone. Primarily, I've gone and seen Colston Loveland go to the Broncos quite a bit, actually. I've also seen Emeka Egbuka go to the Broncos. I do think that the Broncos need another threat for Bo Nix to throw to. I think that it's a little early to grab Colston Loveland, but it's not too early to grab Emeka Egbuka, get you an alpha receiver. This is a guy who everybody thought is one of the most talented receivers in Ohio State history, and he was never the best receiver on his team. He was always behind one of those guys like Chris Olave, like Marvin Harrison Jr., those like Jeremiah Smith. He's behind all of these really, really impressive receivers, really, really talented, clearly a first round draft pick, has the makings of a first round draft pick, and he was never the best wide receiver on his team. The Broncos could really use another deep threat. I think that they find that in Emeka Egbuka, really good at going up and getting the ball. Broncos get another receiver here. Pittsburgh Steelers up next. This is where it gets interesting, because this is where you entirely go against the grain and everything that you've seen from a lot of the analysts, and I've seen some reports that the Steelers are leaning toward grabbing Jackson Dart with their first round pick, or they're thinking about trading up in the draft to grab Jackson Dart. That's how much they love Jackson Dart. I saw a report that said Jackson Dart really enjoyed meeting with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I do think, based off of what I've seen, that Jackson Dart could find himself in the first round. So I do think that the Steelers here are going to choose their quarterback of the future, and I do think it's going to be Jackson Dart. My opinion, I think he's the most talented quarterback in the draft by far. I love watching him play at Ole Miss. Really impressive talent. Jackson Dart here, I think, goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get their quarterback of the future. And maybe find themselves some weapons later on in the draft. Chargers up next. Chargers, when I think of the Chargers, I certainly think of Mr. Colston Loveland. One of the more popular picks that I've seen for the Chargers is Colston Loveland. I think that they could benefit from having a top talented tight end. There's some history with Jim Harbaugh and Colston Loveland, obviously, because they're both, coach, player at Michigan. I think it's a match made in heaven. They could use a guy like Matthew Golden. They could use a guy like Mike Williams. They could use a guy like Shamar Stewart. However, I do think that the Chargers are willing to bring in a tight end, a position that they haven't really had since Antonio Gates left. Harbaugh's obviously a fan of Loveland. I think they bring the guy home and bring him to Los Angeles. Colston Loveland. Green Bay Packers up next. And for the Green Bay Packers, it's got to be Matthew Golden. I do think that they are in dire need of some help on the edge. However, the Packers, I think we discovered last year, are missing a very true alpha receiver. Jaden Reed had his moments, but was ultimately disappointing. Dontavian Wicks definitely had his issues. Christian Watson, when he was on the field, he had his moments where he was incredible, but too many injuries, too much concern there. You just don't have a true number one alpha receiver, and I think that the Packers are, if they don't have one, I think they're going to struggle to keep up with a lot of the other playoff teams. So I think they go out, they grab Jordan Love, a major receiver in this year's draft, use their first round draft capital to choose a receiver, something Aaron Rodgers asked for I don't know how many years. I think they do that here. Matthew Golden going to the Green Bay Packers. Minnesota Vikings. And this puts Minnesota in a very good position because they find themselves choosing between Kenneth Grant, 6'3", 339, and Walter Nolan, 6'3", 305. I think that this is a situation where you kind of look and see who fits Minnesota's scheme a little bit better. I think that it's Kenneth Grant, to be honest. I think that he would be pretty happy to stay fairly close to home, going to school in Michigan, go to Minnesota. I think that he would be an incredible defensive help in the interior box for the Vikings, something that they're significantly lacking in at the moment. And Kenneth Grant is probably 1A to Walter Nolan's 1B on most talented player left available in this draft. I think that the Vikings get a very good talent in Kenneth Grant and improve that defensive interior. Houston Texans up next. And just like the Vikings, I think that the Texans find themselves a tremendous help on the defensive interior. Something that they kind of struggled with, I feel, last year. They had their injuries on the offensive side of the ball, but Houston was not they weren't the greatest on the defensive side. I think Walter Nolan falling here to Houston is absolutely incredible. Will that actually happen? Who knows? But Houston finding themselves with Walter Nolan falling into their lap, incredible for Houston. I think it would work out very well for them. Los Angeles Rams up next. This is where you go ahead and you grab a guy that I've seen go as early as, I believe it was 7. maybe 8 to the Panthers, and that's Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker, a tremendous, tremendous player for the Georgia Bulldogs last year. Considered to be one of the most talented players as far as a raw athlete in the draft, which is why he's going as high as 8. But he's still kind of learning. I feel like getting up to the level of the NFL, I would say. You still have to teach him how to play at that level. But I do think that his ceiling is one of the highest overall in this draft. He just needs to find himself in the right scheme, and I think his athleticism and his ability to make plays will kind of guide him. For the Los Angeles Rams, I think they grab a superstar here on defense once again in Jalen Walker. Baltimore Ravens up next. And now I think that the Ravens find themselves grabbing quite possibly one of the most physically talented, athletic, whatever you want to call it, players in this draft. And I think it's going to be Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart, the stats don't necessarily say everything about how good Shamar Stewart was last year for Texas A&M. Only 2 sacks, but he had 33 hurries. Played a total of 521 defensive snaps, by far the most of any of his years in college. A tremendous talent, tested really, really well at the combine. I think that the Ravens grab a physically athletic, gifted athlete in Shamar Stewart, mold him into that defense that, definitely was looking strong toward the end of the year. Maybe they can start off a lot stronger this time around. They grab an edge rusher for the future, and they grab Shamar Stewart here. Lions up next. In sort of the same breath, I think that the Lions find themselves with Mykel Williams falling into their lap. Again, this is a guy that I've seen go as early as 10. A tremendous talent, again, for the Georgia defense. Georgia's defensive players are always tremendously talented. Mykel Williams is no different. And he has a ton of potential. That's kind of why everybody's been drafting him a little higher, because he has a ton of potential to be an amazing pass rusher in this league. And I think that the Detroit Lions see that here and grab Williams to improve their defensive line. A very hurt defensive line last year. Obviously, they lost Aiden Hutchinson very early on, and it definitely hurt the Lions in the long run. So they definitely want to get some help there on the defensive side, where most of their injuries kind of occurred. And Mykel Williams falling to them at this level, pretty perfect. Washington Commanders up next. Just traded for Deebo Samuel the other day. So they are looking pretty strong. Probably not going to go with a wide receiver any longer here. Whereas I thought that they might consider it. So this is when they have a decision to make. Nick Skirton falling down the ranks, was considered kind of a mid first round talent, but seems to be falling off a little bit. Commanders could use a guy like Gray Zabel, play tackle for them, improve that offensive line. Jane Daniels coming off an amazing rookie season. Get him some help up front, so he can continue to do amazing things and play incredibly. Donovan Izir Uwaku. Sorry, butchered that. Definitely a tremendous talent. Could very much help on the defensive front. Played very well for Boston College last year. By far his best year. um, 14 sacks, 20 hits, 26 hurries. Um, he was incredible last year. I do think that in this situation, um, the Commanders are probably going to beef up their defense. I feel like that's what's let them down up to this point. I do think that they're going to go with the guy from Boston College. Um, and I think he fits in pretty well with what that defense needs to do, which is get to the quarterback. Lots of hurries, lots of hits, lots of sacks from him last year. Tremendous talent. Let's get to the quarterback this year. That's what the Commanders are going to try and do with this first round pick. And the Bills are going to go ahead and they're going to do the same thing. They need some help in that defensive interior. There's no question about it. Derek Harmon is the best defensive interior lineman left. The Bills need it, man. They were struggling on that defensive front for so long last season. And, there were some talks that if their defense had stepped up a little bit, we might be looking at them possibly playing in the Super Bowl instead of Kansas City. I do think that they need to address it very early on in this draft, and I think that they're most likely to do so. Derek Harmon falling to the Buffalo Bills, I think, is a match made in heaven, and I think that that's what the Bills are going to choose here. Kansas City Chiefs, I think it falls pretty perfectly to them. I saw some thoughts that the Chiefs could potentially go with defensive line or, grab Nick Skirton or, maybe Omarion Hampton. But I do think that this is a team that's probably going to end up choosing Gray Zabel. It seems like the Kansas City thing to do, which is improve the offensive line that, protects your quarterback, your $500 million quarterback, your quarterback that's won you 3 Super Bowls. You want to protect him. You couldn't protect him in the Super Bowl last year. You need to improve your offensive lineman. Gray Zabel fits perfectly right in there. An underrated talent from North Dakota State. Put him right in there. Plug him right in there at tackle to protect Patrick Mahomes and possibly make another run to the Super Bowl. That's pretty much all you got to do. Protect Mahomes. And it seems like the Super Bowls will follow. Philadelphia Eagles, last but not least in this first round. And I think in a world for the Eagles where they don't have much that they're not great at, they can go a couple of different ways here. Obviously, they lost Darius Slay. I think he's going to retire if I'm not mistaken. So the Eagles are now down a corner. They do need, they could always use some more edge rushers. Even though they were incredible in the Super Bowl, can never have enough. I believe Lane Johnson just retired, if I'm not mistaken. So they're going to need some help on the offensive line. And the Eagles, could use a third receiver to go, alongside with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. That being said, I think more than likely the Eagles are going to spend their first round pick on a defensive lineman. It's going to be Nick Skirton. Too talented of a player to fall outside of the first round. And I think that the Eagles love drafting young, talented, athletic rushers, pass rushers on their defensive line. And I think this is not going to be any different. I think Nick Skirton is going to fall to the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are going to be very happy to take him, and they are going to get another talented defensive lineman. All right. Well, that's it, guys. This is after the draft combine, obviously. Things could go, a couple of different ways from now leading up to the draft. But let me know what you guys think of how I did. If you guys like this video and you guys want to see more videos like that, make sure that you smash that subscribe button. Comment if you're new here, like the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.